Are you curious about what makes you, you? How your brain is responsible for your thoughts, emotions, and actions? In this video, we'll explore the fascinating world of neuroscience and take a closer look at the inner workings of the brain. From neurons and synapses to the plasticity of the brain and the cutting-edge field of neuroprosthetics, we'll dive deep into the mysteries of the mind and explore the latest advances in our understanding of the brain. Hello, science lovers, and welcome to EQ Science, a channel dedicated to everything science, engineering, and technology. In this video, we will dive into the fascinating world of the brain and how it works. Neuroscience is the study of the nervous system, including the brain, spinal cord, and all the neurons and cells that make up this complex system. The field of neuroscience has made incredible strides over the last few decades, and in this video, we will explore some of the latest discoveries and advancements. The brain is an incredibly complex organ made up of several different regions, each responsible for specific functions. The largest region of the brain is the cerebrum, which is divided into two hemispheres, left and right. The cerebrum is responsible for conscious thought, movement, and sensory perception. The cerebellum is located at the base of the brain and is responsible for coordinating movement and balance. The brainstem is the lower part of the brain that connects to the spinal cord and controls functions such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. One way to categorize the brain's different regions is by the four primary lobes: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. Each of these lobes has unique structures and functions that are critical for everyday life. The frontal lobe is located at the front of the brain and is responsible for many of our higher-order cognitive functions, such as reasoning, planning, decision-making, and problem-solving. The frontal lobe is also important for regulating our emotions, personality, and behavior. It includes the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function, impulse control, and working memory. The parietal lobe is located at the top of the brain and is responsible for processing information relating to touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. It is also involved in spatial awareness and perception, as well as the integration of sensory information from different parts of the body. The parietal lobe contains the somatosensory cortex, which is responsible for processing tactile information. The temporal lobe is located on the side of the brain and is responsible for processing auditory information and language. It is also involved in memory consolidation and recognition, particularly for visual memories. The temporal lobe contains the primary auditory cortex, which is responsible for processing sound, as well as the hippocampus, which is critical for long-term memory formation. The occipital lobe is located at the back of the brain and is responsible for processing visual information. It contains the primary visual cortex, which is responsible for processing information related to light and color. The occipital lobe is also involved in the recognition of objects and faces, as well as spatial awareness and perception. While each lobe of the brain has a primary function, it is important to note that the different regions of the brain often work together to support more complex cognitive functions. For example, the prefrontal cortex in the frontal lobe may work with the temporal lobe to support language comprehension, or the somatosensory cortex in the parietal lobe may work with the prefrontal cortex to support decision-making. In addition to the four primary lobes of the brain, there are other regions of the brain that play critical roles in our daily lives. One such region is the insular cortex, also known as the insula, which is located deep within the brain and is often considered a hidden lobe. The insular cortex is involved in a variety of functions, including sensory processing, emotional regulation, and interoception, which is the availability to perceive and interpret the internal state of our bodies. It is also involved in social cognition, such as the perception of facial expressions and the recognition of emotional states in others. Recent research has also suggested that the insular cortex may play a critical role in addiction and substance abuse. Studies have found that the insula is involved in the processing of drug-related cues and in the subjective experience of craving, which is a common symptom of addiction. Additionally, the insular cortex has been implicated in the pathophysiology of several psychiatric disorders, such as anxiety disorders and depression. It has been suggested that dysfunction of the insula may contribute to the development and maintenance of these disorders. Overall, the insular cortex is a critical brain region that plays a role in a wide range of functions, from sensory processing to emotional regulation. As research in this area continues to grow, we will undoubtedly gain a better understanding of the insula's role in human behavior and mental health. Understanding the different lobes of the brain and their functions is critical for understanding how the brain works and how it could be affected by injury or disease. Researchers continue to make significant strides in understanding the complex interactions between the different regions of the brain, and this knowledge is critical for developing new treatments for neurological disorders and for improving our understanding of the brain's incredible capabilities. Neurons and synapses. Now let's dive into the cells that make up the brain. The primary cells in the nervous system are called neurons, and they are responsible for transmitting information and electrical impulses throughout the brain and body. Neurons are made up of several parts, including the cell body, dendrites, and axon. The cell body contains the nucleus and other organelles, while the dendrites receive signals from the other neurons and transmit them to the cell body. The axon, on the other hand, carries electrical impulses away from the cell body and transmit them to other neurons or cells in the body. Neurons communicate with each other through structures called synapses, which are the tiny gaps between neurons, where information is transmitted from one neuron to another. When an electrical impulse reaches the end of an axon, it triggers the release of chemicals called neurotransmitters, which then cross the synapse to bind to receptors on the receiving neuron. This process, known as synaptic transmission, allows for the transmission of information and communication between neurons. The strength of a synapse can vary depending on the amount of neurotransmitters released, the sensitivity of the receiving neuron, and the activity of nearby neurons. This plasticity allows for the brain to adapt and change, creating new connections and pathways over time. There are several different types of neurons, each with a unique function and structure. Sensory neurons are responsible for transmitting information from sensory receptors in the body to the brain, while motor neurons transmit signals from the brain to the muscles and other cells in the body, while motor neurons transmit signals from the brain to the muscles and other cells in the body. Interneurons are a type of neuron that resides in the brain and spinal cord and are responsible for processing and integrating information from multiple sources. These neurons play a critical role in complex cognitive processes, such as decision-making and problem-solving. Dysfunction of neurons and synapses can lead to a range of neurological and psychiatric disorders, such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and depression. Understanding the structure and function of neurons and synapses is critical for developing new treatments and therapies for these disorders. In recent years, advances in neuroscience research have led to a greater understanding of the complex interplay between neurons and synapses. New technologies, such as optogenetics and brain imaging, have allowed researchers to better understand the functioning of the brain and its various regions. As our understanding of the brain continues to grow, we will undoubtedly gain new insights into the role of neurons and synapses in human behavior and cognition. Plasticity. One of the most fascinating aspects of the brain is its ability to change and adapt. This ability is called plasticity, and it is a fundamental property of the brain that allows us to acquire new skills, form new memories, and even recover from brain damage. Plasticity is most prominent in the developing brain, but it continues throughout our lives. One of the primary mechanisms of brain plasticity is the ability of neurons to create new connections with other neurons. This process, known as synaptic plasticity, allows the brain to modify existing neural circuits and create new ones. When neurons are repeatedly activated, the strength of the synapses between them can increase, making them more likely to fire in response to future stimulation. This process is known as long-term potentiation, or LTP, and is thought to be a key mechanism underlying learning and memory. Another form of synaptic plasticity is long-term depression, or LTD, which is the weakening of synapses between neurons that are not frequently activated. This process allows the brain to prune away unused neural connections and strengthen those that are most important for a given task. Neuroplasticity also involves changes in the structure of neurons themselves. For example, the growth of new dendritic spines, which are the small protrusions on dendrites that form synapses with other neurons, can occur in response to learning and experience. This allows neurons to form new connections and reorganize their circuitry in response to changing demands. The plasticity of the brain is not limited to the formation of new connections and structures. The brain can also reorganize its function in response to injury or disease. When one area of the brain is damaged, other regions can sometimes take over its functions, a phenomenon known as functional reorganization. In addition, changes in behavior can also induce changes in the structure and function of the brain. Studies have shown that meditation can lead to changes in the structure and function of certain brain regions, such as the prefrontal cortex and the insula. Similarly, physical exercise has been shown to increase the volume of certain brain regions, such as the hippocampus, which is critical for memory and learning. The plasticity of the brain has important implications for our understanding of brain development, learning, and rehabilitation after brain injury. Early experiences can have a significant impact on the structure and function of the brain, with potential long-lasting effects on behavior and cognition. Similarly, rehabilitation after brain injury can involve a range of interventions aimed at promoting neuroplasticity and functional recovery. In recent years, there has been a growing interest in the development of interventions aimed at enhancing brain plasticity, such as cognitive training, brain stimulation, and pharmacological approaches. These approaches have shown promise in a range of neurological and psychiatric disorders, including stroke, traumatic brain injury, and depression. Overall, the plasticity of the brain is a critical feature that allows us to learn, adapt, and recover from injury or disease. Understanding the mechanisms underlying neuroplasticity will be critical for developing new treatments and interventions that promote functional recovery and improve quality of life for those with neurological and psychiatric disorders. Neuroscience Research. Neuroscience research has made incredible strides over the last few decades, and there have been several exciting breakthroughs. One of the most significant breakthroughs was the discovery of the brain's reward system. This system is responsible for generating feelings of pleasure and motivation, and it plays a critical role in addiction. Studies have shown that addictive substances such as drugs and alcohol activate the reward system, which can lead to addiction. Another significant breakthrough was the discovery of the mirror neuron system. Mirror neurons are a specific type of neuron that fires both when the individual performs an action and when they observe someone else performing the same action. This system is believed to play a critical role in empathy and social cognition. Neuroimaging. Advancements in neuroimaging have also played a significant impact on neuroscience research. Neuroimaging techniques allow researchers to visualize the brain in action and gain insight into the underlying neural mechanisms of behavior and cognition. There are several different neuroimaging techniques, including functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, positron emission tomography, or PET, and electroencephalography, or EEG. fMRI is a non-invasive technique that measures changes in blood flow to different regions of the brain. This technique allows researchers to visualize which areas of the brain are active during specific tasks or behaviors. PET is a technique that uses radioactive tracers to measure brain activity, and it is often used to study neurological disorders. EEG, on the other hand, measures the electrical activity of the brain through electrodes placed on the scalp. This technique is often used to study brain waves and can provide insight into the brain's underlying neuromechanisms. Neuroprosthetics. Another exciting area of neuroscience research is neuroprosthetics. Neuroprosthetics are devices that interface with the nervous system to restore or enhance function. Another example is the development of prosthetic limbs that can be controlled directly by the brain, allowing individuals with amputations to regain mobility. Neuroprosthetics, also known as brain-computer interfaces or BCIs, are devices that use electrical signals from the brain to control external devices, such as prosthetic limbs, computer cursors, or robotic arms. The goal of neuroprosthetics is to restore function to individuals who have lost the ability to control their limbs or other body parts due to injury or disease. The basic principle of neuroprosthetics is to record electrical signals from the brain and decode them into commands that can control an external device. This is typically done by placing electrodes on the surface of the brain or within the brain itself. The electrical signals from the brain are then amplified and analyzed using computer algorithms to identify the intended movement or action. One of the most well-known applications of neuroprosthetics is in the field of prosthetics. Prosthetic limbs have traditionally been controlled by mechanical switches or sensors. But with the advances in neuroprosthetic technology, it is now possible to control prosthetic limbs using signals from the brain. This has enabled individuals with amputations or spinal cord injuries to regain the ability to control their limbs with remarkable accuracy and precision. A fascinating type of neuroprosthetics that has helped over 750,000 people worldwide is cochlear implants, which can restore hearing in individuals with hearing loss. Another application of neuroprosthetics is in the field of assistive technology. Individuals with severe disabilities or paralysis may use neuroprosthetics to control a computer sensor or other assistive device using their thoughts. This has the potential to greatly improve quality of life for individuals with disabilities, allowing them to communicate, control their environment, and access digital resources with greater ease and independence. Neuroprosthetics also hold promise for the treatment of a range of neurological and psychiatric disorders. For example, deep brain stimulation, which involves the use of implanted electrodes to modulate neural activity, has been used to treat Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, and depression. Similarly, neurofeedback, which involves training individuals to control their brain activity using real-time feedback, has shown promise for the treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, anxiety, and other disorders. Despite the potential of neuroprosthetics, there are a number of challenges that must be addressed in order to fully realize their potential. One major challenge is the development of reliable and robust algorithms for decoding neural signals. The brain is a complex and dynamic system, and interpreting its electrical signals with high accuracy and reliability remains a major research challenge. Another challenge is the development of minimally invasive and biocompatible devices for recording neural signals. While current neuroprosthetic devices have shown promising results, they often require invasive surgery to implant electrodes in the brain. This can be risky and expensive and can limit the widespread adoption of neuroprosthetic technology. But, as with any area of research, there are ethical considerations in neuroscience. Ethical and societal issues must also be addressed in the development and deployment of neuroprosthetics. There are concerns around the potential of misuse of neuroprosthetics, as well as the potential for unintended consequences, such as changes in personal identity or loss of privacy. Neuroethics is a field of study that explores the ethical implications of neuroscience research and its applications. One of the major ethical issues in neuroscience is the use of brain imaging technology, such as fMRI, to study brain function. While these technologies have enabled us to better understand the neural basis of cognition, emotion, and behavior, there are concerns about the potential misuse of this information. For example, could employers or insurance companies use brain imaging data to discriminate against individuals based on their cognitive or emotional profiles? Could brain imaging data be used as evidence in criminal trials, potentially influencing jury decisions? Additionally, there are questions about the distribution of these devices and the potential for societal inequalities to emerge, as they are likely to be expensive and may not be accessible to all individuals who could benefit from them. In addition, the study of the brain also raises a number of broader ethical and philosophical questions. What is the nature of consciousness? How does the brain give rise to subjective experience? What are the ethical implications of our growing knowledge of the brain on our understanding of personal responsibility and free will? Despite these challenges, The field of neuroprosthetics holds enormous promise for improving the lives of individuals with disabilities and neurological disorders. Advances in this field will likely be driven by continued research into the fundamental mechanisms of neural activity and plasticity. In conclusion, neuroscience is a fascinating field that continues to make significant strides in our understanding of the brain and its functions. From the anatomy of the brain to plasticity, from brain disorders to breakthroughs in research, and from neuroimaging to neuroprosthetics, there are so many exciting areas to explore in neuroscience. As our understanding of the brain continues to expand, we will undoubtedly make even more incredible discoveries that could have a significant impact on our lives. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found this video informative and engaging.